Hi, class. Welcome to week 10. Right now, I'm going to go over the guidelines that I gave you at the beginning of the semester regarding the structure of your final report for your human rights community engaged projects. And it's important to note that the structure and guidelines for the final report also apply to the final oral presentations the last 2 weeks of class. Also note that next week, although I held office hours today, but next week I'm also going to hold extended office hours, and so feel free to stop by. Um, my office hours begin at 10:50, 11 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, and I'll be in my office for about 2 or 3 hours. So make sure you stop by if you want to talk about your human rights community engaged projects, or if I can answer any questions that you might have on the class or anything else at all. And so first I'll talk about your discussion board. For this week, which is using pretty much everything that we've read and discussed in class and in this book, and applying that to understanding human rights as it applies specifically to your community. And so again, you'll use the concepts and ideas discussed in the book and throughout the class. Some ideas would be understanding and interpreting the meaning of human rights, specifically looking at the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, applying the three types of human rights, social interactions, understanding the relationship between power and human rights, using this idea of human agency that's been so important in this class to advance human rights, understanding the relationship between storytelling and human rights is very important. Storytelling has also been a big topic that we've discussed throughout the semester, and how important it is to engage in this type of storytelling and not to tell the stories of others, to take their voices. Learning from interviews with community members as well. So you've learned a lot, hopefully, talking to your community organizations of how they view human rights policing, how they would like to be policed, how police can better bring forth human rights for the community, how they can apply human rights, how they can provide more resources to support community members. All these things very, very important. So throughout all of this, think about how you can use all the ideas that we've discussed and read this semester, how you can use this to write social policy on how to apply or how police can provide better service, especially in regards to human rights towards your community organization and the people that they represent. Um, so in other words, how can police transition primarily from a social control institution into a human rights organization that provides services and resources to community organizations and the people that they represent? And so I ask in that discussion board that you give three examples, at least three examples, to showcase how police can apply human rights to better serve the community organization and the people that they represent. And make sure you discuss how you use the ideas and concepts from the book and in class to apply human rights. And even further than that, link how they can apply human rights from the ideas and discussions throughout this class, but link it to specific human rights that you would see in the 1948 United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and or you can use the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And so always, use stories, use examples to illustrate your points and substantiate your arguments. And so I look forward to that discussion board. Next week, we're going to do something a little bit different to kind of break up any type of monotony, keep things interesting. We're going to look at the documentary, The Age of or the documentary called 13th, but we're going to have a critique on the criminal justice system in the age of mass incarceration. And so I think that'll be very interesting for next week, and we have a discussion board based on that. So I think you'll like it. Okay, but moving on now, let me cover, again, this is something that was handed to you in the beginning of the semester, but it's something that I'd like to go over now. And that's your human rights policing final report. And basically, it's like any university class. If you go out and do independent research, you're going to write about your independent research project and talk about it. In this case, you're doing a human rights community engaged project. And so, and a lot of it comes from that midterm exam. So those of you that did well, which most of you did on that midterm progress report, it shows that you're kind of well on your way in doing this human rights policing final report. And so you'll run, so the first part is you're going to want to write a brief abstract, which reflects the organizational structure of the paper. Where you talk about the focus of your community engaged study, uh, major problems or questions related to human rights and policing, a statement on the findings, the key findings, the key points, and then you'll end with a major policy recommendation. And so abstract should be about 200, 250 words, really not more than that. Then you have your introduction. And it follows any typical introduction. In fact, the guidelines that I've given you for your for this final report is the basic guidelines for any academic article ever published in any journal. And so it's a typical expectation of what you would publish for a typical class or a journal outlet. And so again, part one, introduction, and that's where you state the major goals of your human rights community engaged project, the major objectives, what it is that you wanted to know. What was your research question? What did you want to know? And for many, it'll be, how can police provide more resources to support and protect the human rights of your specific community organization and the people that they represent? You also want to indicate in that introduction why your community engaged study has importance, why it's important to the people, whether it's to the community members, why it's important to Wisconsin or why it's important to La Crosse. You want to provide a rationale for the study. Why did you want to do it? And of course, that's to help bring in human rights policing. Who is the intended audience of the study? And who can benefit most from this type of project? Who can benefit most from this type of study? And so, make sure, by the way, with your final report that you have a creative title, a very good title. The abstract I already told you about. Then the introduction, where you talk about you state the major topic of your paper, of your report, its goals and objectives, why it's important, and the intended audience, and how the community can benefit from this type of project. Okay, that's part one, introduction. Part two, discussion of the community organization. Pretty straightforward. Describe the community organization you chose for the Human Rights Policing Community Engaged Project. Talk about its history, its goals, its missions, its accomplishments, when it began, how successful they've been in accomplishing their goals and missions, things like that. How is the organization structured? What is its function in the community? Things like that. And so, what is their major role in the community? How do they accomplish that role? In other words, what do they actually do? So you'll give us a nice overview of that community organization. Part three, brief role of the researcher. And this is where you talk about your place in the research. So describe your the context, your interest in the topic, for example, your type of investment. Why did you pick this community organization and or members for this project? Is it of personal interest to you? Is it of just general concern to you? Things like that. And what is your major goal for this community organization and its members? And then you'll make clear who did what throughout the research process, or through this process. What kind of interviews and observations did you make? Which brings us to section 4, brief method section. How did you gain access to the community organization? How did you collect data throughout the process? How many people did you talk to? Who did you talk to? Did you observe? Who did you observe? Things of that nature. provide a discussion how you developed themes. Maybe perhaps you had themes that was culled from the literature, or perhaps you developed themes from your first conversation with community members. And of course, themes might change all the time. You talk to one person, you might have 3 or 4 themes that you think are important, and then you talk to someone else, or 2 or 3 other people, and that can show maybe that you need new or emergent themes to think about, or that the original themes weren't so important. And so talk about what kind of themes you developed from talking to people and observing, and how those themes may or may not have changed over time. And then how did you begin to make sense of your findings related to, this community organization and how we can apply human rights policing? 5 is your major findings and takeaways. Discuss your major findings and takeaways that result from your community engaged project. Make sure you're related. Make sure to relate your findings to the themes presented in the interview process. So when you talk about your findings, those same themes that you used in your interview process, those themes should be there. So in your findings section, you'll have 5 findings section, maybe with the title, and then you have theme 1, theme 2, theme 3, theme 4. So I think 3 to 4 themes would be acceptable for a project like this in a final report. So discuss the 3 or 4 major themes and takeaways that resulted from your community engaged project. Again, relate your findings to the themes from that interview process. Discuss some surprises or unexpected results from these community engaged projects, and always use examples. So within each themes, as you talk about your major takeaway themes, you can use interview quotes, or you can use paraphrases or direct observations that you made, things like that, to substantiate the development of those themes and to substantiate those findings, right? So in other words, provide evidence to your major points and to your themes. And then so that was 5 major findings and takeaways. And then 6 policy recommendations. Discuss the major implications of your findings, and then provide some clearly labeled policy suggestions that bring to voice your community organization and representatives. Just like here, you can see my policy recommendations from the book. I have, general policy recommendations. I put in bullet points, and then I put, 1, end forever wars and international military bases. 2, and mass violence against the earth and non-human animals. And so you can put your policy recommendations exactly like that, clearly labeled policy suggestions on how to bring human rights policing to your community organization and the people that they represent. So we want some specific policy recommendations for police to apply human rights to their jobs and to the community organization. And make sure that the policy recommendations discuss, again, human rights and policing as it relates to your community organization and members. And so your oral presentations is a briefer assignment where you kind of give the fast and concise version of your larger final report. So your final report, you elaborate on everything, all 5 or all 6 sections. And then in your oral presentation, you kind of give a summary of each of those presentations. That introduction is extremely important. Make sure you, again, discussing the community organization. Briefly, you can talk about the role of the researcher, a brief section on methods, but more elaborate on findings and major takeaways, and of course on policy recommendations. And so hopefully that structure, I think, makes it very easy for you. You're not writing your magnus opus. You're just trying to show that you can conduct an independent community engaged project and have some findings that can tell us something about how we can improve policing in our society, and even more, bring about human rights policing into our communities. And y'all are going a long way in doing that. And so so far, y'all are doing great. Projects have been developing beautifully. And now that I've articulated and I've written the guidelines to you, given to you in the beginning of the semester, but now I've articulated that to you. And so consider this discussion, take a closer look at the guidelines and structure that I've given you. And next week on Tuesday, if you would like to meet me in my extended office hours to discuss any of this or anything class related, please feel free to stop by. And I think I think that's all. So thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing y'all on the discussion boards, and keep up the good work on your human rights community engaged projects. Thank you very much.